Hi, I'm Arthur, and a while back I ended up going to Adepticon, also going this year. Gonna be having a lot of fun there if you want to go there and see me. And I gotta admit, it was one of the funnest experiences I've ever had, being one of the biggest conventions I've ever gone to, and one of the first times I've ever felt like I truly belonged in a public space like this. It's one of my more formative memories, and I'm pretty attached to that convention. But one of the memories I tend to cherish the most is when me, Crack Duck Mishmash Painting, Pancreas No Work, the ladies that work on Heresy Hotline, and a few other friends don't have YouTube channels, and I don't feel comfortable enough saying the full names on YouTube. I mean, I do, but it'd just be kind of funny to dox them in a video talking about Bolt Thrower of all things. But yeah, we ended up going to this place called the X-Ray Bar and Arcade for some live music. See, whenever I go visit a location, especially if it's in like the Midwest or like a normally flyover state, I tend to research the area to find interesting curiosities to visit. And one of the places I tend to look for is a cool arcade or bar that has a fun aesthetic to it. So a punk rock barcade kind of caught my eye, and apparently they were having live music as an Adepticon after party. Specifically, an all-orc band was playing known as Da Goth Rockers, and I gotta admit, Da Goth Rockers, their music, it was okay. It's pretty good. It's fine. It's not my type of thing. It was orc parody music, very at home with like hair metal from like the 80s and 90s, which isn't really my thing, but they had a really good stage show. Like, I was low-key hoping for something heavier, but the stage show was awesome. It was just a bunch of dudes dressed up in full orc costumes with a bunch of their kids running around dressed up as goblins, throwing fake human body parts everywhere, filled with candy at the audience. The pit was awesome. It was such a dope-ass experience. Also, the band that played before them, The Eradicator, shout out to him. I'd never heard of him until I went to this place, and I thought after reading his description, he was just going to be a spicy meme band that wasn't going to have much substance to them, but honestly, now one of my favorite bands ever, and the fact that there isn't that much of an online presence for him upsets me genuinely because he was genuinely amazing. I got his merch. Also got the Goth Rockers merch too, but anywho, it got me thinking, what other bands made Warhammer music? And as all the old heads are probably grinding their heels to the ground right now, probably one of the only and one of the most well-recognized bands in terms of Warhammer is Bolt Thrower. Definitely, I would say probably the first Warhammer band, or at least Warhammer album. It is a death metal band that arose out of the extreme metal and punk era that Britain had been kind of going through in the 80s, being considered one of the most emblematic bands of British metal, while also having some of the best consistency in their discography. They have a pretty decent track listing from what I remember, as it's been a while since I even listened to them, because I did listen to a little bit of their later stuff. And we're going to be talking about one specific album that they released today, and if you know about them, you know what album this is. We are going to be talking about their second studio album, Realm of Chaos, Slaves to Darkness. I want to give a little breakdown of the tracks, a bit of the history, and discuss, what this short album is about and why it's so cool. It's kind of an odd band, and I think you guys would like this as a bit of an aside. Sound cool? No? Yeah, well, you know the deal at this point. Too bad. I cover Space Marines too much on this channel, and even though the Space King video didn't do too great last week, I want to cover something that I think is cool, and I have a long-standing history with music, but we'll get into that in the wrap-up of this. But yeah, guess what? Gamer subs. Fun fact, fellas, since I had 20, I have been an avid gym rat. I was a huge nerd in high school, but I decided to kind of diversify myself when I hit 20 and realized that I was getting winded going upstairs. So lifting, running, you name it, I tried it, and it was all great, and eventually it even led into a short stint with personal training, which was pretty damn fun. I know a decent amount about dietary supplements, so when Gamer Subs came to me privately and said they were going to be releasing a new product with creatine in it, I immediately asked for an extra amount of it because today is the day they drop Gamerade, and I swear by creatine with my entire soul. Gamerade is a hydration and creatine drink mix that you should definitely try. Creatine helps with your energy levels as well. To flex that I actually have a science background here, it mixes with the water molecules that get into your body and your muscles after a certain degree of saturation dehydration and produces a compound with the combination of those two that aids in the production of ATP. ATP is the main molecule you need to do anything, so it helps you be more energetic at baseline, especially during moments of high activity. But also, there are signs that due to the fact that there is creatine stores in your brain, at least in small amounts, higher levels of creatine would suggest that you could reach a higher level of cognition, albeit the studies are a bit inconclusive, if memory serves me correctly. In short, this tasty juice is really yummy and has good stuff in it, so you should use code BONEZONE to check out for 10% off to get yourself some gamer aid. I personally really like the lemon lime, as weirdly enough it reminds me of a pre-workout I used to slam back about a decade ago. But me being nostalgic about my intensive levels of caffeine consumption aside, let's get back into something that definitely does require a little bit of excess energy: Bolt Thrower. Okay, so cute little juice ad out of the way, let's get to it. Bolt Thrower is a metal band, death metal specifically, and before I cover any of their songs off this album, I just really want to give a background here about them up to the point of where this album was released, because there is a bit of a history to them. These fellas are a band that, for their time, was actually seen as a bit weird, being part of the early crust punk movement, which, if you don't know what that is, it's like a grunge, but metal, and also kind of a lot harder to listen to. It's kind of cool. If you like weird genres of music, it's one of those ones that you probably have heard about. Think kind of extreme metal, but also with a little bit of punk mixed into it. It's kind of cool. But if you don't like crust punk or that doesn't sound cool, these guys might not be for you, but they are pretty cool. So just enjoy the silly lore video going forward. These fellas made a cute little band out in the middle of nowhere, and not to simplify their history a bit, but it is a little bit confusing. Like a lot of these kind of indie cult bands, they had a consistently rotating cast of new members up until their disbandment, and even to discuss just their second studio album, it is a little bit confusing, but yeah, so them releasing old members back into the wild from captivity aside, let's talk about, the starting lineup and who ended up singing on Realm of Chaos. So the original band was founded by two individuals by the name of Barry Thompson and Gavin Ward, who is of no relation to Matt Ward. I just think it's a funny coincidence. Either way, they were joined later by two individuals by the name of Alan West, who was the initial vocalist on their first album, and Andy Whale, who was their drummer. This made the initial lineup of Bolt Thrower, and comically enough, they started in Coventry. Well, at least the idea came from Coventry, which, if you don't know anything about location, is a bit too close to Birmingham for most people's comfort. They say if you get within a kilometer of the accursed land known as Birmingham, you can hear someone silently sharpening a very long knife in the distance, but no matter where you go, it never gets any louder and you can never find the person. But if you aren't careful and you don't either enter Birmingham or get far enough away, you look down to notice your wallet's gone. Either way, this is more or less the lineup we have to concern ourselves with, sort of. So for the first album, this was the lineup, and this is also kind of funny because the lead guitarist ended up also playing bass because their bassist did not show up for recording for a little bit. So if you look at the track record of the history of who was on the band, you see one guy took up both roles for a little bit, which is kind of funny. But for the album that we're talking about, they had one major change, and that was the singer, who was Alan West, ended up stepping down, and they ended up replacing him with Carl Willits, and that was the lineup that they had to sing on the 40k album. So basically how the story goes, they were contacted by Games Workshop, whom the people of their office at that time, who was still relatively small in comparison to the juggernaut they are today, they just really enjoyed the small amounts of music they had distributed up to this point and wanted to see if they could do some 40k stuff for the recently released Warhammer 40,000 Rogue Trader that had been released in 1987, and I remind you, at the time of this discussion, this was about 1988 going into early 1989, as the album, if memory serves me correctly, was released in 1989 or 1990. But luckily for them, it was actually kind of an easy back and forth for them to discuss, because the boys who pretty much established the band were all really into Warhammer Fantasy in the past. So it was kind of a no-brainer for them to promote this new and wild fantasy sci-fi whatever game. Thus the concept and the creation creation of the album Realm of Chaos, Slaves to Darkness had begun. This led to an entire album based off of 40k, or at least what was around, with songs like The World Eater, Eternal War, and so on, basically discussing the setting as they had. The album actually had some decent success, even if it was just a weird gimmick album. And as someone who enjoys a lot of cult music, I find it to be such a cool novelty to think that this actually exists, that this is a real thing that we can listen to and it be like, worked on by GW staff. Like the album cover was made by the individual who made the cover to Rogue Trader, the first book. I believe it's John Sibic or whatever. So I'm going to go through the album now and just give a brief impression of each track and just discuss them. And I'm hopefully not going to include too much of the music just because I don't want to get too into the weeds here, but I think that it's going to be easy because if you just look it up on YouTube, you could find a copy of the full album. It's a bit of a short album, but yeah. Let's get into the intro and hop into the first track, which is Eternal War. Okay, track by track, let's get into it. I'm kind of excited because the intro was kind of hype. It felt like I was getting some kind of sermon from like a Space Marine chaplain, or maybe even just a guard commissar who is getting ready for his troops to engage with orcs on some level of extreme violence. Then we get into the first track, which is Eternal War, and I had realized really swiftly an unavoidable fact. Something that I had somehow forgotten. See, I'm a bit of a music history guy, so sometimes I divorce myself from the music itself and think about its history as informing me about how good the music is and if I would like it. But I forgot before getting into this one, I don't actually really like metal that much. Yeah, I know, you can take my Warhammer 40k enjoyer card away. Yeah, I've just never been much of a metalhead. For the most part, I've always enjoyed doom metal, I guess. But like outside of that, I'm more of like an R&B, hip hop, and an alternative kind of guy. But I don't know. It's keep that in mind. So yeah, Eternal War fucks hard and keeps fucking until the song ends. But it is fast, heavy, hard, and probably perfect pit fodder at a concert, loud and screaming about the endless war of the far future, which, very fitting considering it is 40k. Pretty good guitar with blast beat drumming was also pretty dope. So yeah, on to the next one, which is Through the Eye of Terror. Okay, the song fucks hard. I actually really like this. It's a bit heavier than the last one, though I usually don't tend towards heavy music, but I don't know, the sound was super catchy. I don't know how to say this, but the guitar work on this is almost iconic in a way. It feels almost unique and memorable enough that I don't know, I just feel like this is one of those songs that, like, if it were to play a lot and people were to say this is their favorite song, I would understand. So right now, second song in, top of the heap is Through the Eye of Terror. On to the next one, which is Dark Millennium. Pretty good. No real major notes about anything other than it's just pretty good to listen to. I do like how there is a slow progression of the BPM to get extremely fast at the end. It's almost like a doom metal track in the beginning and then eventually getting so fast that it's pretty pulse pounding. I kind of enjoyed it. Not my thing, but still pretty good. Next song, All That Remains. Unremarkable as all hell, it's kind of just been lost in my mind. Unironically, when I finished this song, I genuinely had to re-listen to it because I completely forgot it, and I don't know why, because it's genuinely unlike anything I've ever heard. I don't know, I don't listen to the genre of music, but it just felt kind of boring to me. Okay, next track, Lost Souls Domain. Okay, I am starting to feel my lack of care for the genre of extreme metal here. I feel that is a bit too much noise for my liking. I feel like I should talk to someone about this who actually enjoys listening to metal. Whatever. Alright, let's get it. I like Nurgle, so let's do the next song, which is Plague Bearer. Okay, much better. I actually really like that one. A bit repetitive for my taste, but I do quite enjoy its decision and discussions around disease, as it is very thematic for Nurgle, but you can definitely tell by the tone and pitch of the song that it is definitely fantasy Nurgle, where he is a lot meaner and not nearly as funny. Anywho, let's get into the next track, which is called World Eater, though comically enough, this is the one track I know about from this album, as I've seen a lot of people actually talk about it before online. So yeah, let's listen. Okay, I gotta admit, this one fucked really, really, really hard. I actually enjoyed this one, and in fact, I put this on my, listening actively playlist. It really captures the spirit of the World Eaters, which is really funny considering how far back in the history of Warhammer this is coming out, about 2-3 years after Warhammer 40k was even established. It's brutal, about taking skulls, it's about kicking ass, eating worlds. It's good. I fuck with it hard. Let's go into the next track with Lifted Spirits, because I'm kind of enjoying this so far. And the next track is Drowned in Torment. Oh shit, another banger. Hell yeah. This album might be growing on me in a weird way. It's pretty damn cool. I don't know, I'm not much of an extreme metal fan, as I've been saying over and over again, but this shit is getting cooler by the second. This is getting really good. So, yeah, next up. Oh shit, the self-titled song Realm of Chaos, and for a self-titled track, this is pretty goddamn good. I was half expecting to be disappointed, but it's catchy, and before I finish this album off, I'm gonna actually have to re-listen to this a few times, because I actually did enjoy this. This one's also going on my playlist. Okay, after finishing the final track, let's get into this entire album and unpack it a bit. So in general, I think the album is pretty solid. I'm not too big of a metalhead, but I am a big fan of 40k, a big fan of the history of it, and I may be a bit uninformed on this, but I think in general I can state that I feel it is above standard and gets the passing grade. It's actually kind of above what I would expect from Warhammer 40k metal. Like, not to shit on people, but there is a huge predilection of songs and bands out there that make 40k music, and it's ostensibly just kids bop for 30-year-olds with too much disposable income. But this is definitely kind of from a different era. It does help that my ears are not exactly tuned in to hear and understand the lyrics that there are here, so I'm not 100% certain what he is saying all the time, so I'm gonna look it up later and just kind of see if it's any good. But I don't know, I think it's fun. Might be cringe for all I know, but it's pretty good so far. I do quite like it. I enjoyed it. I'm not just going to shit on it for being a metal song, but it does have some standouts, like Realm of Chaos and World Eater. I'm gonna go back to these songs specifically later. It's something that you guys should listen to at this point, because the album is in its entirety on YouTube, and it's pretty decent to listen to because it is pretty short. So with all that being said, let's get into the wrap-up of this video and just kind of discuss my closing thoughts about 40k music as a whole, why this is kind of an interesting thing, and, where we can go from here, because I think that 40k music as a topic is one of the ones that we don't talk about, because it's one of the least appreciated genres of 40k creation, and just creation for a genre of media as a whole. Hi, hello. This is later in the day, Arthur. I decided it was a good idea for me to actually speak with a friend of mine and a friend of the channel, an all-around swell guy, someone who started around the same time as Mishmash and me and the crew, a guy by the name of Uncle Sam from Uncle Sam's Lore. Because I am terrible at discussing metal, I asked around to see if I could get some friends on board who could just discuss what their opinions are on metal and the album as a whole, as someone who actually likes it. So, take it away, Sam.
So Realm of Chaos is a pretty interesting album for me because it's one that I've been aware of for years, yet never listened to in its entirety. I've always been aware of Bolt Thrower as a band, but I've never listened to them. And they retired about 9 years ago, and they're not touring anymore. The last album they released was in 2005. They're a band I've been aware of. I don't really know a lot about them, but I've always been aware of this album because I always knew it as that one album that was tied to that one tabletop game thing. And I did not know anything else about it. I remember watching a YouTube video about the album like years ago back in high school, and I don't remember what the channel name was, but I've always been aware of this album, and the main thing that jumped out to me was the cover art, because the cover art I always thought looked awesome. Not the re-release. That's just called Realm of Chaos. The original late 80s pressing that's using the Rogue Trader art, that's what always caught my eye, and it's not really surprising that I later on became a 40k fan, mainly because of the fact that I just spent most of my time in the summer of 2022 listening to Adeptus Ridiculous and looking at like 40k art and just trying to like get like the vibes, and the vibes is kind of what drew me to 40k. And if I'm being honest, the main thing this album does well, not musically mind you, that's a different conversation, which I will get to briefly, but as a 40k representation thing, this album gets the vibe of early 40k 40k down pat. If I'm being honest, this album sounds a little bit more grimdark than most of Rogue Trader or 2nd Edition. If anything, I feel this kind of encompasses a lot of aspects of like 3rd and 4th, especially after Games Workshop started fleshing out the universe and everything else, rather than just being Rogue Trader. And I know that was Bolt Thrower doing this by accident, because the lyrics themselves are more, again, going for vibes. You're not going to have a ballad about Karn the Betrayer. That's not what this album is. It is a metal album first with 40k theming, which is how most metal subgenres work. It's like, hi, I have pirate metal. Well, I'm gonna make a metal song and make the lyrics about pirates. Like, that's just kind of how metal works. It's very tongue-in-cheek in a lot of places, and that's one of the main reasons why I like the genre, because it's the musical equivalent of an 80s action film. But I will say this, when you're listening to this on Spotify or YouTube or however you listen to music, listen to the full dynamic range edition of the album. The reason why I say that version is that the original 2005 re-release of the album has some weird loudness war compression going on that does not sound good. So I, in an experiment, listened to the original master from the late 80s, the re-release from 2005, and the full dynamic range version, and the full dynamic range version sounds the best of the three. It's also the one that's the easiest to find if you're looking into buying the album physically. It's also available on Spotify and YouTube, or however the heck you listen to music, etc. Whatever, you listen to that version. It doesn't have the 40k cover art, but unless you're finding late 80s vinyl, most likely it won't, and even then the reissue cover art's still pretty good. Overall, the album itself, in terms of tempo, which is very important if you're talking about a death metal album, because a lot of times death metal is very, very fast. At least it's important to me because I'm used to listening to faster death metal. Stuff like Deicide and Early Death, for example. And I don't know, I'm used to listening to faster death metal, so when this was kind of more of a mid-tempo thing, I was kind of like, I wasn't really expecting it, but I was pleasantly surprised because there is a heavy amount of hardcore punk and very thrash metal groove in terms of like the drum beats and the actual riffs. It feels, in a lot of ways, it kind of sounds like a really heavy version of Kill 'Em All, just more sludgy and gross, because this album is like one half doom metal and one half death metal, and it's kind of blended together to make this weird mid-tempo, very groovy, very distorted, grindy album that I really, really like the sound of. And that says a lot, because normally I do not like stuff that sounds like this. And that's just a personal preference thing. And honestly, the lyrics really help, because even though I cannot understand what the singer is saying, when you read the lyric sheet and you listen closely, the lyrics themselves match a lot of the instrumentation and the actual riff writing themselves. And the main thing I like about this album, especially from a lyrical aspect, is that this is not a 40k concept album. It's going more after vibes versus, explaining stuff. And personally, if you like concept albums, you may be a little disappointed by that, but the best way I would describe it is turn this album on, get a decent set of headphones if you got them, and look at some old 40k art. And I'm talking old John Blanche, old Adrian Smith, just older stuff, and you will very quickly just kind of get what this album is going for, because that's the vibe that at least that gives off to me. In terms of standout songs, probably my favorite is All That Remains. It's very groovy, it's very punchy. I don't necessarily know what it is about it. It just kind of makes me lock in. World Eater is a very close second. It's a standout track for a reason. It also introduces the bolt thrower riff that you see on a lot of their later albums, because while listening to this album, I also kind of went, hey, I'm going to listen to this song and this song and this song and see how they changed their sound over time. And they definitely became a slower metal band, but I heard that riff at least 3 to 4 times. So it seems to be kind of a motif that they have. Overall, I think this album's really neat, and if you want to listen to a decent 40k metal album, this is not a bad choice. This is really, really good. To be honest, of all of the 40k metal contributions, this is probably the best one. And there's a reason why, because it's lived on past it just being, oh, it's a metal album but themed to Warhammer. No, it's a good metal album. And if you like extreme music, you should listen to this. If you don't like extreme music, you should at least give it a shot. And if you find it too extreme for you, I don't blame you. I tried listening to Deicide the first time I ever listened to metal, and it didn't sound like anything other than noise, so I completely understand. Regardless, thank you, Mr. Bones, for your time, and I shall now return back to my cage. Blah.
Okay, cool. So with him saying his piece out of the way, let's get into some ideas here. And that is that I think this shit is really, really cool. I like the idea that even back in the day, people were aggressively into the idea of mixed media presentations for 40k. The representation of the creative medium of art, music, sculpting can kind of meet in the middle ground with this fucked up weird Venn diagram. Bolt Thrower, although not my thing, is pretty good, because even though they aren't necessarily a type of genre that I listen to, I can tell that they are something pretty good. I like their music. I think that it started off a little bit on the slow side and not to my liking, but as the album progressed, I found that it was actually really decent to listen to, and a few of the tracks I have listened to since my first initial listen. I have a bit of an interesting deep lore dive to give to you guys before I sign off, and that is that before I was a biology nerd, like a lot of you guys know, I was into paleontology, and before I was even into 40k, I was actually a radio DJ. In high school, yeah, I know you'd peg me as like a theater kid. No, I wasn't. I have terrible stage fright for some reason. But yeah, I was actually working while in high school to become a certified radio station management and operations guy, as well as TV station, but that one kind of doesn't, whatever. And I was on the air for about a year and a half, 2 years-ish at my high school's radio station while I was actually working to get my certificate there. And I even aimed to go into broadcast journalism, but it turns out that I just really like music and talking and didn't give a single fuck about journalism. So when it comes to music and music history, I was always curious. So yeah, I just kind of abandoned that dream, and one thing led to another, and here I am talking about Space Marines for a living. But basically, I'm fond of stuff like this. It's a curiosity that stretches outside of its genre in order to become something new, and I think we should encourage this. But to circle it back to the beginning of this video and talk about a more modern representation of this, the Goth Rockers, literally a band I have seen in person, are pretty damn cool. I mentioned before their music wasn't really to my taste, and that's just because it came off again a little bit like what I mentioned before, where it's just kids bop for 30-year-olds with too much disposable income. But it goes beyond that, because their performance was fantastic. The way that they just gave themselves to their characters and gave themselves to the setting of 40k, as their entire gimmick was so unironically, without a word to describe it better than this, beautiful. They had a cute little dramatic monologue before the band even performed, discussing the purpose of the Goth Rockers, which I'm pretty sure is just the lore for the gothic rock bands for the orcs, which is just to motivate orcs when they're on their way for like a long journey through warp space. I really think it's really, really fun. And there's a lot of other stuff like this out there that, although is a bit cheesy, I think it is really fun, and it has a very decent argument to exist in a creative space. Like, we've all listened to that one metal song about Rylanor the Ancient to probably a ludicrous degree, and let's not even talk about 40k's burgeoning artistic community. It just gives me a warm fuzzy feeling whenever I think about how creative a lot of the people in this community are. Though I also just have a good memory of that night as a whole, and the Goth Rockers also signed the poster that I got at their merch stand, and also complimented me at Adepticon the day after, because they went to attend it, and I was wearing the shirt that I got at the merch station, and they said I was pretty cool. Those guys are goddamn cool. But what do you all think? I know this is a bit of an odd video, but I kind of like doing real world lore a lot. It's such a fun topic for me, and it gives me time to catch up on books. And by the time you guys are seeing this video should be coming out by the time I'm a little bit out of country. I'm gonna go visit good old buddy Colin, aka Pancreas No Work, and we're gonna be playing some Halo Flashpoint and all that goodness. I hope you guys enjoy me covering more offbeat topics like this, but you gotta trust me, we are going back to the good old next week while we discuss Space Marines. Again, but I talk shit, but I really like them. Thanks to Uncle Sam for helping me out with this. I genuinely appreciate it. And if you could please go sub to his channel and support him, I would greatly appreciate that a lot. Thanks to my channel members for supporting me. With your help, I am able to not die. And also get my nephew a Minecraft Lego set for Christmas, which I've never been someone who had the money to actually give my parents or my family Christmas presents. So it's kind of a special thing for me because I don't really have that many living relatives that I can actually get presents for. So it made me feel kind of nice. And I'm pretty sure he loved it. And considering he snatched that shit out of my hand the second I opened the bag and he could smell the Minecraft there. So that was kind of cool. I use this money to support my editors, myself, and, you know, make sure that Christmas is a bit happier for me and my family. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you all so much. And thank you all for watching once again. Until next time, I hope you all have a wonderful night.